What are the critical systems that we are trying to protect? And what does security mean in that scope for the business? We really need to focus on the business's critical systems. What would it mean to a business if system A was down? And how does that translate to business impact? Just because you received a score of, let's say, 5 out of 5, like 100%, it doesn't mean that you have an amazing security program. Like there could still be there could still be gaps, and we need to really test the operational kind of readiness of it.
The biggest mistake most companies make today is that they think that passing an audit means they're secure. Fact is, it doesn't. Today we're going to be talking about what actually happens when things go wrong. What happens when a company thinks they're secure and then they get breached. My guest today lives in that reality. She is a senior strategic consultant with Mandiant. She works with organizations when the stakes are high, the pressure is real, and the margin for error is basically zero. She's led cybersecurity maturity assessments across several frameworks like NIST and ISO and PCI DSS. But more importantly, she has actually helped companies to respond to real incidents, run executive tabletop exercises, conduct PCI audits as a QSA, and build roadmaps that move security from theory to execution. So in today's episode, what we're going to be doing is breaking down why being compliant doesn't necessarily mean being prepared, why your biggest blind spots might be inside the organization and you might not see them, what incident response actually teaches you about leadership under pressure, and how to actually build resilience before things go sideways. So if you care about operational readiness, executive alignment, and not learning security lessons the hard way, then this episode is for you. Let's get into it. My guest today is Judy Singh. Judy, welcome to the CSM Lounge.
Thank you so much. I'm so excited to be here.
Yes, I'm really looking forward to it. It's taken a while to get this put together because she's been very busy with work. So I really appreciate the fact that she was able to make out the time today and we could have this conversation. But before we get into it, I've got a quick ask. If you're new here, welcome. On this channel, I help people build real careers in tech, in cybersecurity, especially people who are newcomers or career switchers. And if you've been here before, thank you for coming back to watch another of our videos. But if you're new, what we do here is every month we bring real conversations around cybersecurity. Let's talk about broader tech discussions around career growth, how to content, product security, tech, AI. So if you care about things like that, like careers and technology, protecting your future, hit subscribe, check out the playlist, and maybe share this with someone who would like to listen to this as well. Okay, back to today's episode. So, Judy, again, welcome to the program. Your title is Senior Strategic Security Consultant. That's a mouthful. What exactly do you do?
Yeah, no, thank you so much for having me. Yeah, my day-to-day as a senior strategic consultant, so I'm currently at Mandiant, which they got acquired by Google. So there's a lot of opportunity here. And really, like in my day-to-day as a consultant, it can look very different. It's helping a lot of clients, and it's really based on the ask of the client. So it could be from security assessments, kind of from the strategic side, where we help them with things like threat modeling, assessments, or even like operating model reviews, to helping them like prepare for an attack, such as like tabletops or writing up their incident response plans. And I think like this podcast is so great, like for me, particularly being even like a woman in cybersecurity, as a like Asian woman, I think those are career kind of things that I really thought about as I even moved into Mandiant here. And I love this role that I'm in, and I feel really challenged. I'm always stepping out of my comfort zone to help organizations better their security program and posture. And that's the ultimate goal of my role here at Mandiant.
That's fantastic. I don't know if it's incidental. I was actually at a webinar this afternoon and someone was speaking. She's the chair of the Vancouver chapter of the IEEE. And it was a conversation around women in tech and how it doesn't seem that there's a lot of women, but it's beginning to change. So one of the things that I like to promote a lot, I'm an ally, to see diverse voices in this space, because it's not a man's world only. So we should be able to actually have diverse voices in here. So happy to have you here. Happy that you're actually pushing those boundaries. And we're going to come back to that conversation a little later. But I wanted to start out talking about cybersecurity maturity and compliance. Because we know that today, generally, especially in North America, there's a lot of, you've got to pursue some certain level of compliance or certification, either it's NIST certification or SOC or ISO or PCI DSS. But again, for most people think when I want to do something, we have to be this compliant or that compliant. But does compliance actually equal security? And how does framework alignment actually translate to operational readiness for most enterprises?
Yeah, that's a really great question. I do a lot of security assessments for organizations, as you mentioned, like NIST, ISO, like even PCI. Some of these are industry standards, while some of them are like more, strict like requirements. I think like with compliance, just because you meet compliance, hit a certain score, like, you receive a score of 4.0, for example, does not mean that you are necessarily security all the time. Like you are facing the security and have the right kind of security controls in place. I think organizations are really focused on compliance and hitting like a certain number because it's a requirement that the board provides them to. But what I think is more important that sometimes we lose focus on when we are trying to hit these compliance controls and meet a score is understanding our crown jewels. What are the critical systems that we are trying to protect? And what does security mean in that scope for the business? So rather than taking control by control and scoring each control, we really need to focus on the business's critical systems. What would it mean to a business if system A was down? And how does that translate to business impact to help protect the organization? Just because you received a score of, let's say, 5 out of 5, like 100%, it doesn't mean that you have an amazing security program. Like there could still be gaps, and we need to really test the operational kind of readiness of it.
Yeah, that's so true. And I think many times it's something I say it's more substance, it's more noise than substance. That's how I look at it. But sometimes it's easy to see through that noise, especially if you've been doing this for quite a long time. It's easy to tell when it's just noise and they're actually secure. So what would you say would be an early indicator that a company is actually mature and it's versus, they just got documentation, but they're not really mature? How would you tell the difference? Like an early indicator, like a telltale sign?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think it really comes down to whether or not they actually have the programs and operational processes in place. So, for example, I think vulnerability and patch management is one of the biggest topics that I always focus on when assessing an organization. Like, yes, they can maybe have a policy in place, but when we go to talk to the security analyst or the technical people, whether or not they're actually patching or they're tracking vulnerabilities across their systems, I think this is always an indicator, because like at the end of the day, like that is what is most important, like whether or not you understand your systems and the security implications of new vulnerabilities that are coming up. I think that is always an early indicator to me whether or not they are actually monitoring and watching that. And if they're not, then I think like everything else typically, not always, typically is not working, because that should be kind of the earliest stage in your security program to protect. And when you don't have that, it's kind of like how can you even have the incident plans or playbooks? Like how do we know that's working? So yeah.
Exactly, absolutely true. I think that's so important for most enterprises. I think it, like rightly said, it comes down to the security culture. And you did mention, you mentioned, incident response, as an example. And I know, for those who don't know, for listening, for those who know, I know that in a previous role, you did a lot of work in that space as well. I'm sure you've seen several enterprises, several businesses where they respond to incidents very well. When they have an incident, they're like a duck in water, like a piece of cake, we can handle it. And for some, it's like, pull out all the cables until everything stops, or like the house is on fire. So, what would you say is what separates organizations that handle incidents well and from those that really just, once they have an incident, they spiral into doom and gloom and everything is gone on fire? What's the difference? What's the separation? And what's one thing that they could have done that would make the difference in how they respond to those incidents?
Yeah, great question. I think it really comes down to like the team being prepared, and that comes to muscle memory. Organizations, I think that respond well to IRs, it's really a team sport. Like it's not an IT problem. You have legal, HR, communications. And when those processes are not defined in place on who's going to communicate to who or who should be doing what, I think those are kind of where you see the downfalls, because at the end of the day, like, an incident is really a business problem, and not an IT problem. So making sure that the plans are tested, like, rather than, I think, like, just kind of the theoretical tabletops, like doing hands-on tabletops and then escalating it upwards to the different streams.
Yeah.
Often, like, even once a year, I feel like it's not enough, because like you probably aren't going to forget even like last like a week ago, right? So doing these often and making sure that we're testing the plans and everybody knows who to contact, I think is really important. And then in the event of an incident, when it does happen, like, you're ready, you're prepared, everyone knows where to go, like what logs we should pull up, what systems do we have. I think that is what really separates kind of those who are not prepared to those who are.
Yeah, I completely agree. And you mentioned tabletops there, and I was just, see, when you mentioned tabletops, I sort of thought to most tabletops, and I was like, I know someone who once said to me, and I know you probably have heard this before, it was like, tabletops, they mean nothing because you did it once a year, and then you forget about it, and then when the incident actually happens, no one knows what to do, which is what I think is the problem with most tabletops. One, either they're too infrequent or they're too vague, because again, you're not really doing anything that actually it's going to potentially happen when you have an actual incident. So the lessons you're trying to learn, you don't really learn any lessons, and that's a challenge. But I know for many companies, what they want to do is, we have a tabletop schedule for this time. Every year it's a checkbox that they want to tick off, and it shouldn't be a checkbox, right? So how do you think executive behavior can actually impact the impact that tabletops actually have? Because again, most times the board is like, oh, we do a tabletop exercise every year. Have you done it this year? Yes, done. Tick. Have you done it next year? Yes, tick. They're not really concerned about what actually comes out of that exercise. So what can we do to make it actually more meaningful, not just something we're ticking off every month or every year, as the case might be?
Yeah, that's a really great question. And for us, we also do a lot of like more, either it's executive focus or technical focused tabletops as well. But I think like when you talk to executives, you really have to focus on the business component. So
exactly,
in the event of like an attack on these systems and you're not able to run your business for like a day, like that, I think will really get them to understand the impact better, and really like learn from that like tabletop exercise what they should be doing and what it means. Because at the end of the day, like, yes, the IT team will be helping like the technical, they'll look at the investigation, but it is a business problem, and the steps to take to communicate to customers or your internal stakeholders, external stakeholders, like, that is something that the executives will have to manage. And I think it's really important to like have even like security training or specific like kind of threat reviews with the board, so that they know what the risk is, and embedding this into like, let's say, their enterprise risk management process, I think has been really successful from some of the organizations I've worked for, because now you have another kind of entity that is understanding and managing this risk, and it's embedded into like the business program, from a day-to-day kind of risk management perspective.
Yeah, completely agree. I think that stakeholder management piece is so important, because again, if you properly manage the stakeholders, whoever they might be, then it makes it a lot easier to actually deal with that. But I think that's where the challenge is. I don't remember off the top of my head, but I think there's this. I think it was after the SolarWinds event that it became mandatory that somebody on the board has to have experience with cyber compulsorily, because otherwise then what are they going to be? Because you're talking about cyber and they don't care about cyber, because again, cyber is not typically a money making cost center in the business, right? We don't make money like marketing or sales. But we actually help the company make money, because again, if we can keep the lights on and you can keep the company business running, then you're making money. But once you go down, then you're not making money. So in that way, I think cyber does help companies make money as well. So it's not as cut and dried as it seems. But in the event that, there's, again, it's all governed by the board, and the board is most times not as technical as, the soldier ants who do the work every day, who do the day-to-day, security work and all of that. What advice or what would you say are the tips for successfully translating technical risk? Because again, I was telling someone the other day, I think our industry is notorious for one thing. It has the most acronyms of any field of endeavor in the world. Everything is an acronym. Either it's a credential, or it's a tool, or it's a solution, or it's a technology. It's an acronym. We can spit out acronyms every day. We're good at that. But no one wants acronyms because acronyms don't really help us, right? So how do you move from that technical jargon gobbledygook that we speak to get to a point where, okay, I understand that if I don't do A, B happens, which causes my business to go down for the board, because that's what the board actually understands, the zeros and ones that make up the bottom line. How do you marry that together?
Yeah, that's so funny because I think like there is so much technical jargon like across cybersecurity, all of the acronyms we have, everything that we talk about. I think it really comes back down to tying your technical and cybersecurity risk to the business impact and what does that mean for the business? Like I think oftentimes what executives or technical like CISOs struggle with is like, if I'm doing everything right, then the board won't see it, like they won't know the impact. But what, even for us, what we do to help with that kind of, getting budget for security and all of that is sometimes we come in to do that security training to educate on the impact that this might have in terms of dollars, in terms of downtime, so that they understand the risk, the costs, and the opportunities in security. And I think like tying those two in from like security to business risk is really important when you're trying to ask, the executives for something. And that's because that's what they understand, right? It's their business and what that means. Yeah. So finding ways to do that is important.
Hey, Cybersec Migrant listeners. If you're enjoying the show, help us spread the word. Share the Cybersec Migrant podcast with your friends, your colleagues, and your network. It's the best way to help others discover our awesome content and to join the conversation. And don't forget to follow us on your favorite podcast platform. We're available on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Amazon Music, iHeartRadio, and any other place where you get your podcast, so you never miss an episode. And do hit that like and subscribe button on YouTube. Your support helps us keep bringing you more valuable content, insights, and stories, and all these tips from the world of cybersecurity. And thank you for tuning in. And now, let's get back to today's episode.
Okay. Now, at this point, I'm going to call on your leadership chops because I know you've held leadership positions, currently in leadership role within cyber, which is difficult. And I know, like we talked like joking earlier, it's so hard to get security budget. Security is the last thing they want to big budget for. It's always like, can't you do it for cheaper? So one of the things you will have to do as a security leader is to build up that security roadmap for the business. And if I was in charge, I know I would want every new shiny tool on the board. Every single possible thing, because we love those tools, right? But money isn't infinite, right? So we have to choose. So when you're sort of building out a security roadmap, how do you differentiate between aspirational, I would love to have that tool and that tool and that tool, and the realistic part of, okay, you know what, I can only afford X 2 tools, so I'm going to get this and this. How do you build your roadmap where you take that into consideration and you build it in a way that it works for the business, but you're also successfully getting the tools you need, no more, no less?
I know AI is like the biggest talk in town, I think, right now. And the investments around every tool, I think, obviously we want all of the fancy tools. I think for organizations that have like more limited budgets, again, I think it goes back to your crown jewels. And as a first step exercise, I think conducting things like business impact analysis is to learn from the business, like what is our mandatory recovery time and what are our mandatory systems we have to protect that are critical to the business. And that should be where we focus our, I think, money too. And even at Mandiant, what we do a lot of is looking at the threat landscape of that company, of that specific sector that you work in. So my advice would be to look at your crown jewels and then spend your areas on the highest risk. Sometimes I find I think there's a misconception that the more money we spend, it means that we're more secure. But I have seen organizations spend millions of dollars and if they're not monitoring things, if they're not using the right tools, then that can be a risk. So identifying your baseline of what you really need and then kind of the nice to haves to really go back to protecting, I think, the crown jewels.
Yeah, and that sort of leads into the next thing I was going to ask, because again, like you rightly said, sometimes organizations spend money the wrong places. Well, not the wrong way, just the wrong place, and it's a waste of money. In your experience, where have you found that most security leaders, most businesses waste their security budgets in wrong spend as opposed to doing something else?
Yeah, I think that's a really great question. I think oftentimes like some of the more like big complicated organizations, they may have like multiple of the same security tools, like multiple EDRs. Yeah, I see a lot of that because of, just, kind of over time, they may have acquired a lot of tools, or they don't know like shadow IT. They have like different stakeholders like running different things. But I think ultimately, like, what it comes down that I've seen is that like there's never enough funding like from the cybersecurity, because obviously like tools are expensive. People in security is such a niche area. Like it's always hard to find the right level of resources. I think that is a bigger struggle than like having too much money or misspending areas, because I find that most CISOs I've really talked to, they're very stringent. They're watching their budget. They obviously have a limited budget, as we talked about earlier. So I think like it alludes back to like having the right people in the industry. So like if people are looking for security jobs, I would totally encourage them to go into that, because I feel that there is an area that we can continue to grow and help secure. Like as we talked about, even AI, there's going to be new attacks that come in.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's a great segue into AI. So AI, what do you think? Is it going to become Skynet and take over the world, and maybe send another Terminator from the future to come and kill us? What's the big deal about AI? What should we be worried about? And for you as a security leader, what keeps you up at night when you think about AI? Is it how it's going to take all our jobs and we're all going to become like robots?
I know. I think every organization I have talked to is thinking and talking about AI. So if how to manage AI, what AI models are being used. Like we are in this like new era, I think, of AI usage that organizations are not ready for. It's kind of like when organizations moved into the cloud, right? There was just this huge kind of boom. Like this is where we're at now, where we're starting to use AI. The governance is lacking behind, and AI is such a big topic to our clients in terms of how they're managing it, how they're using it. What does it mean from a security perspective? I think from an external perspective of AI, we see a lot of new AI threats. So like social engineering, even deep fakes, like we see so much of that our clients are dealing with. And then from the perspective of internal organizations, it's how do we secure the AI models we're using? What data is being ingested into these AI models, and where is the data hosted? I think from a security perspective, AI is really exciting, because like you can also have these AI tools to help you manage alerts even. So that's all to say that like I think there's a lot of work to be done here. And one of the biggest pieces of advice I would give organizations is, at the very minimum, inventory and understand how AI is being used, so that you can protect the data that you're ingesting into these AI models.
Yeah, that's true. Know what you have, and then you can actually control it. It's easier to manage and secure what you have when you know what it is you have. If you don't know, then good luck to you. I want to bring it back to yourself. So we've done all this technical talk. I want to come back to you as Judy, right? Again, you mentioned earlier it's not very often that you see a woman like yourself, an Asian, in this space. So again, kudos. But again, what was, if you could share with the audience, what was your motivation to actually keep on going to get to this point where you are, where you've been such an authority, if I could put it that way, in your space? What was your motivation to get to that point? What pushed you on?
Yeah, I love this question. I think obviously being a woman of color, an Asian woman, like in the cybersecurity field, you are working with a lot of, this is a very male dominated field. And
true.
Sometimes like even when you present yourself or you join a call, I think there's already that like pretense of like, you look young, or you aren't as like experienced, and all of these things. And when I joined security, like honestly, I just landed in this role when I started at Deloitte. I had incredible mentors that like supported my career throughout my journey, who have uplifted me and given me that support to be to where I am today. Something that I've always fallen back on is just like knowing and like having the your certifications and knowledge can never, like, that is what people will see once they get to know you. So doing like your certification, studying hard, like getting those things and making sure that you are knowledgeable, I think has helped me to get to where I am today. And I still deal with so much, honestly, imposter syndrome and, uncertainty, like, yeah, like, and dealing with that, I think it's how you present yourself. I think it's really important. But for me, like at this point in my career where I'm like at a new job, I think I'm being pushed to like out of my comfort zone. And that's exactly, I think I just have to remind myself that like that means I'm growing and it's a good thing.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think it's so important. Like you rightly said, imposter syndrome happens to all of us. And I was talking to someone a couple of weeks ago and I said, it happens to the best of us. Don't assume that because someone is a director or a manager, they never get imposter syndrome. Everybody gets it. What's important is what do you do when you get that feeling? When do you do when those thoughts come into your mind? Do you throw it all away or do you face it head on and try to do the best you can? So I think it's so important to be able to deal with that. And so
exactly.
I want to ask you and say, okay, how have you dealt with that, when you've had that? And you talked about skills, sort of certifications, very important. I think third-party validation of skills, which certifications are, is fantastic. But what other skills should somebody who is thinking say, I want to be like Judy tomorrow. I want to move into an advisory role. I want to, grow in my career. What skills should I be developing? What skills should I be focusing on? Yes, certifications, but what else?
Yeah, that's a really great question. I think communication is really important. So how you like deliver your thoughts, especially in consulting particularly, our job is to talk to clients. So how you present yourself, how are you using your words to make sure that they understand, and even knowing like the target audience you're talking to, like what we talked about earlier of like executives or technical, like how are you prepared for those discussions? I think for me, I'm always trying to prepare like every interaction I have. So number one, I think communication is really key. And then second is just being, humble and honest in your interactions, even with your colleagues, like the openness to learn and ask questions, not be afraid is really important. And then, just being resilient, I think that is also really good. Like you have to like know that like you don't know everything, and being okay with being uncomfortable and then getting back up. It's going to be like a continuous cycle of that. So I think those are kind of the three areas I would say have helped me be successful in this career.
I like that. Being comfortable with being uncomfortable. That's so true. That's so true. One more thing I wanted to actually ask, you mentioned something there about, business speak and all of that. And I've had a lot of people say things like, oh, I want to go into GRC because I am not technical. Or I want to do this. Oh, I can't do this because I'm not technical. What they mean is actually they can write code, yes. But they say I'm not technical. Because I tell people, even if you're in GRC, it doesn't mean you're not technical. Because again, have you seen a NIST special publication, what they look like? Pick up any of the NIST SP. It's a technical document. If you give that to anyone to read, they're going to sleep off after 2 seconds because it's really boring. You've got to understand them to be able to explain them. So again, coming back to the business, coming back to growing your career, how important is it to be able to understand those? I'm not technical, or is it better to be able to say, oh, I understand business speak. I can pass the message across, like you said earlier, communication. I can bring that message to the executive level, or should I focus more on technical speed, building my technical abilities? Which would you say is more important, or is it like two sides of the same coin? And how do you balance that?
Yeah, that's such an interesting question, and I love that. I think like for me, I come from a business background, so I went to school like here and my degree was in management information systems. So I also feel that like, oh, I'm not technical enough because I don't have like a computer engineering background or like a computer science kind of background. I think like in security, like I think having the technical baseline is important. Like that is something you cannot just miss and come into like doing security. So at least having the foundations, like either you do that through certifications or learning on your own or some sort of like courses. I think that's what's really important, right? And then even from here, going beyond that, like to really help learn yourself is then understanding the business. So that would be kind of the second piece. So I think having that baseline is important, but to say that like oh, I'm doing GRC and that's not technical. Like that to me is something that just like irks me all the time, because I don't agree with that. I think you still need that kind of understanding to be able to grow and help the companies in security. I think it's still possible to be in cybersecurity if you don't come from, like, let's say a computer engineering background, because at the end of the day, like, we use so many tools now, right? Like we're not coding, or we have AI and all of these tools. Like we don't need kind of that like computer science background anymore. So I think anyone can get into cybersecurity. Like even me, I'm like the best example. Like I do not come from a computer science background and I'm still here. So
Yep. True. I say the same thing too. My degree is in chemistry, so I've got a second one in pharmaceutical chemistries. But hey, look at me here doing cybersecurity stuff. Okay, it's been such a fun conversation and very technical. But again, I know people think cyber folks don't have fun, but we do have fun. What do you like to do to relax? What's your idea of fun? If you weren't thinking about risks and all of that, what do you do for fun?
For fun, I mean, I'm in Vancouver, so I love going skiing. Hiking, yeah, I think that's really good. And just like yoga, because honestly, like consulting is a very stressful job. Like I travel a lot, I work a lot. Like that's something that's like, I think, it's, people think like, oh, you're a consultant, like you travel a lot, but really we're just going to like a client site and we talk to them for the whole day. So yeah, like yoga is my like go-to, and like, even doing podcasts like this, I love it. And this mission, I think, is so important to encourage more people to like join the security space. So that's what I would do. Fantastic.
So again, when you're going hiking or skiing, you just might see Judy skiing or hiking next to you. But I want to say thank you so much, Judy. It was so nice having this conversation, talking about all these technical things that are so important, that sometimes they get overlooked, but I think they're so important that we have those conversations. I'm going to put a link to Judy's profile in the description down below, so feel free to connect with her on LinkedIn. If this conversation challenged you, how you think about things like readiness or risk or leadership under pressure, I'd like to know what you think. Put a comment down below. And, what's that one gap you've seen on your tech team when it comes to execution or resilience that Judy has touched on today that has, sort of sparked a thought in your brain? Because again, it's not just a cybersecurity issue, like you said, it's a leadership issue, it's a business issue. So whether you're building product, you're leading engineering teams or advising executives, or even if it's just a startup you're scaling, the difference between we have a plan and we're actually ready can be a big thing. And you can see that everywhere. So if you found value in today's episode, share it with someone other on your team, especially the person who owns operations or risk, so that they can learn something new. Because these are the conversations that save teams from learning lessons the hard way. But I want to, on behalf of the audience, say thank you again to Judy for coming on today. This was a very good conversation. And until next time, this is Femi signing off on the CSM Lounge, and I'll see you in the next one.